All right, let's dive into this. We're going to break down Lyn Alden's concept of broken money. Now, this is a fascinating idea because it reframes our entire financial system. It suggests that the problems we see today aren't just recent mistakes, but they're actually the result of a single, fundamental glitch that started a long time ago.
So here's the big question. What if the very money we use, the foundation of our economy, is built on a flaw? The core idea here is that we're living with a huge technological mismatch. And no, this didn't start with the internet or iPhones. This is a glitch that's been in the system for over 150 years.
And this slide right here, this is where it all began. Back in the 1860s, with the telegraph, we suddenly had the ability to send information, to send a promise to pay, around the world in an instant. But we couldn't send the actual value, the gold, the final settlement, any faster than a ship or a train could carry it. So for a century and a half, we could talk fast, but we had to pay slow. And that gap had to be filled with something.
So, how did we plug that massive gap between fast information and slow settlement? Well, we did it with ledgers. Big, centralized ledgers run by banks, central banks, and governments, all keeping track of who owed what to whom. It was a clever workaround for sure, but in solving that one problem, this solution created a whole cascade of new ones that we are still dealing with today.
You see, when you centralize the ledger, you create a system where money can be corrupted. The value can be changed with just the stroke of a keyboard. Debasement, which used to mean physically shaving a tiny bit of metal off a coin, can now happen on a massive scale overnight. It also enables a level of surveillance that rulers of the past could only dream of. And it shattered the world into more than 180 different national currencies, what Alden calls arcade tokens, that only work in one specific arcade. It's basically a slow, invisible rug pull on the savings of people all over the world.
And this is Alden's key insight. This is why she argues that something like Bitcoin isn't just another fintech app or a new way to pay for coffee. It's something much bigger. It represents a foundational fix, the invention of fast settlement that finally closes that 150-year-old gap that the telegraph opened up.
Okay, so we've established this deep technical problem, but it doesn't just stay a technical problem. It bleeds out and evolves into a system that creates and reinforces inequality across the entire globe. Because when one country's centralized ledger becomes the world's ledger, you end up with some serious power imbalances.
Alden has a name for this: monetary neocolonialism. It's a system where, developing nations are technically sovereign and independent, but in reality, their economic fate is completely tied to the currency and monetary policy of another country. It traps them in these endless cycles of debt and dependency.
And if you want to see the scale of this, just look at this chart. It's absolutely staggering. The US dollar is on one side of 90% of all global currency trades. It's not just America's money. For all intents and purposes, it's the world's primary financial ledger for everything, for trade, for debt, for reserves.
So think about what this means. If you're a developing country and all your debts are in dollars, your economic destiny is being decided in Washington, D.C. If the U.S. Fed raises interest rates, your debt payments can suddenly skyrocket. If the U.S. government prints trillions of dollars, the value of your country's savings can just evaporate. It makes it incredibly hard to ever get ahead.
Now, this brings us to the U.S. fiscal situation itself, which Alden describes using this powerful and, let's be honest, pretty accurate meme. It's a runaway train. And it's not really a partisan issue. It's not about one party or the other. It's about deep structural forces that are now almost impossible to stop.
And this train is being fueled by some very real, very powerful engines. You've got an aging population with huge mandatory spending commitments like Social Security and Medicare. You've got tax revenues that are now weirdly tied to the performance of the stock market. And the big one, the 40-year tailwind of falling interest rates is over. It's gone. In fact, just the interest payments on the national debt now cost more than the entire U.S. defense budget. Think about that.
So what do you do if you're a nation or a major corporation and you see this global financial system built on a reserve currency that's on an unstoppable path of debasement? What's your move? Well, you start looking for an exit. You actively search for a way off the train.
And you can literally see central banks around the world doing this right now. They are voting with their wallets. For the past decade, they've stopped being net buyers of government bonds. Instead, they are aggressively buying physical gold, a hard, neutral asset that they can hold in their own vaults, safe from the whims of another country's monetary policy.
Corporations are playing a very similar game, and it's a brilliant bit of arbitrage. The playbook is simple. You borrow money, dollars, euros, whatever, at incredibly low interest rates. Then you use that cheap debt to buy up scarce hard assets, like your own company's stock, or increasingly things like Bitcoin. You're basically taking out a loan in a currency you expect to get weaker to buy an asset you expect to get stronger.
And here's the real consequence of that whole game. It becomes a massive engine for wealth concentration. The people and companies who have access to cheap credit can play this game. They can protect themselves and even profit from currency debasement. But regular savers, people without access to that kind of leverage, they're just left holding a melting ice cube.
Okay, so if all of that wasn't enough to think about, let's throw one more massive force into the mix: artificial intelligence. And this isn't some separate futuristic topic. It plugs directly into the heart of this whole broken money idea.
I mean, really think about this for a second. In the near future, AI agents are going to be economic actors. They'll be buying server time, selling data analysis, paying for their own electricity. And to do that, they're going to need money. But what kind of money works for an AI? It's going to have a very specific set of requirements. They are going to need permissionless money. An AI can't exactly walk into a bank, open an account, and show two forms of ID, right? It can't fill out paperwork. So it's naturally going to gravitate to systems it can use directly, programmatically, without needing to ask a human for permission. We're talking about native digital assets like Bitcoin or certain stablecoins.
And as this new AI-driven digital economy starts to grow, the resources that power it become incredibly important. This phrase says it all. AI compute is the new oil. Just like oil powered the 20th century economy, compute power is becoming the single most critical strategic resource for the 21st century.
And you can already see this shift happening in the physical world. For the first time ever, the construction of new data centers is on pace to actually overtake the construction of new office buildings. The physical landscape of our economy is literally being rebuilt around this new digital reality.
So this monumental shift, this new layer of our economy being built by and for non-human actors, it absolutely demands a new kind of monetary foundation. It needs a money that is native to this digital world, a currency that is as electric and programmable as the agents that will be using it.
So, in the end, this whole journey away from broken money isn't just a story about technology or finance. It's really a question of power. It's about control. As these two worlds, the financial and the digital, crash into each other, the big question is, who gets to write the rules for this new economy? The outcome of this 150-year-old problem is still being decided, and it's going to shape everything for the next century.